Good to see you, everyone. My name is Robbie Howell. Typically, I run a show called Theorycrafting, where I take civilizations not yet present in Age of Empires 2 and take my best shot at implementing a fitting design for them in the game as we know it. However, we recently got a big-ass patch, and I thought it could be an interesting idea to go through it and check out what those changes mean for Theorycrafting writ large and for the game's broader trajectory. I am in no way a competitively proficient player, and as such, this is not going to focus on balance. This is more going to focus on implications and precedent for different theory crafting mechanics that I might be able to use in the future, and for what the devs are signaling they want out of the game going forward. I'm going to be using this list of changes from user Toonbach on the AoE Zone forum. Thank you, Toonbach, for your contribution. I could not find a more proper and official list of changes, so pardon the jank. Let's jump into it. Beginning with the infantry changes. So we got a bunch of interesting stuff going on here, and to me what this signals is that the devs at least know that something is wrong with infantry. And we do even have this nifty new technology, Gambesons. A+ on the history front. We should have had Gambesons be the name for one of the armor upgrades. But the actual effect of it, I'll be honest, I'm a little disappointed in, or at least underwhelmed. See, the militia line getting pierce armor is not going to be what makes infantry viable, nor what makes infantry civilizations viable writ large. In my experience, infantry civilizations only succeed off the back of a very powerful, unique unit. See the Berserk on the Vikings, the Huskarl on the Goths, if you can call that succeeding. Infantry are fundamentally broken in Age of Empires, because they cannot close distance. If your enemy is over here and you are here as an archer, you shoot them. As a cavalry, you run them down. As an infantry, you sit there uselessly. Your militia line aren't catching the archers anyways. This kicks in too late. What we need to see is something that either hits all infantry units, which frankly, if Gambeson said all infantry get +1 pierce armor, I might be like a little more appreciative of it, I suppose. And that's not a fair statement. I am appreciative of it. I'm very glad to see the devs are trying to do something about infantry, but like, I don't think this is going to be it, Chief. You know what I mean? And more to the point, even if this did hit all infantry, I still don't think it would be the best way of solving the problem. I think what would be more interesting would be to lean into what infantry actually did on historical battlefields, and that was control space. Why did they control space? Because there were tons of them, and you could muster them very cheaply. As such, I think it could be much more interesting to make infantry cheaper and quicker to create, rather than this stuff. That way, they'll still die in droves, but it's not as bad to have them die in droves, and you should be able to outmass your opponent like we see gods do late game, if they can somehow survive everything else. So, just my 2 cents, I think this is probably the single most important signal that we got from this patch overall. Let's move on to some of the other stuff. I'm going to skip through a bunch of the things I don't think are that important. This actually bears a little bit of mentioning, the Canon Galleon changes. This to me signals that the devs are willing to change very well-entrenched conventions within the game. This comes up more a little bit later on. And I think overall is just a good signal that they're willing to take some of the dumb things out. Like, cannon galleons shoot a projectile the same size as bombard cannons and yet don't have splash damage. Even if people are like, well, it's convention, well, it's there for balance purposes. It clearly wasn't. Like, it clearly didn't add a lot to the game to have cannon galleons function that way. And I look forward to when we can have their projectile speed match bombard cannons too, as it always should have. So, moving on from that. Here's another good one. The button, as Ornlu calls it. Flemish Militia. Now, this scaling technology thing is a great thing for theory crafting. Or, pardon, this scaling technology thing. Why? Because I think scaling technologies are incredibly cool, and we now have a framework for how they could work in-game. You could expect to see this mechanic on one of my builds going forward, because I love the idea. Oh, and here's another one. The Stronghold mechanic. Yes! Yes! We got a healing aura beyond just the Caravanserai. And this shows that that healing aura thing, that's not just limited to a single one-off unit gimmick. It means that we might be able to see it on a couple more builds going forward. It obviously has a lot of similarities to my Vexillarios unit that came out of the Roman build. And even though I think Strongholds is still an incredibly bland, shitty technology, this is way more interesting than what it was previously and is, I'd say, medium historical from my knowledge of Celtic history, which is more substantial than many other histories as it's a particular field of interest for me. Let's take a look at more. Ah, yes, the Chinese change. This one I see as not being very well liked. To be honest, I don't like it either. I, as you know, like civilizations that are weird and bend the rules of the game. And the Chinese are a very old civilization that has bent the rules of the game in a very distinctive way for a long time. And I think that homogenizing them is not a good thing. I think the signal the devs are trying to send is that they are trying to cater both to newer and more veteran players, or players of all skill levels. But I don't think that this is going to do that. I think it's just going to make the Chinese suck more broadly. But if I recall correctly, I think that was Ornlu's or Spirit of the Law's impression of it as well, so that's not necessarily a new comment. Signal-wise, I think this one is a miss. Oh, but this one was fun. The Ethiopians team bonus. This is miles better. I've thought that outposts should have their stone cost removed, period, for quite a little while, and this at least signals that that is a possibility. Unfortunately, I think this team bonus is still going to suck, but it will at least be much more fun and interesting than it was previously. And the Ethiopians also had, this is another of the main things I wanted to talk about, the Royal Heirs effect. Now, what does this signal? Well, two things, actually. First of all, -3 damage from cavalry. I had this on my Dutch Castle Age Unique Technology Urban Militias at one point. I changed it in the last Recraft video, but we hadn't had a mechanic like this before. And I recently did it again on Simbelmina and my Polynesians build, having units take less damage from buildings. And so having damage reduced from specific unit types is something we really haven't seen much before, and I don't think we've seen at all before. And this establishes a precedent that it's acceptable in game. Oh, my Moravians build did it as well, but as a percentage. The other one is Royal Heir's old crappy effect being bundled into the Shotel Elite upgrade. Yes! That's excellent. That's exactly what we need. Might be personal preference, okay? I despise technologies that only affect a single unit. I hate them. This is part of the reason I dislike Gambesons so much. Technologies that affect one unit should typically, in my opinion, be part of the unit from base, unless we want to play in a game that has like a billion technologies, so you can customize units in all sorts of little funky ways. The fact that they didn't do it to Mahouts as well is an absolute crime. The fact that they did it to the Vikings Berserker Gang as well is another huge win. That's one I've actually discussed with people in the comments section before. And so, validated, my guys. But yeah, I think that this is a great signal and pushes the game in what I think is going to be a better direction. Oh, and I should clarify, I don't hate all technologies that only affect one unit if it affects that unit dramatically. Like, Commanderan is a good example. I think that's okay because it completely changes that unit. +1 Pierce Armor does not a unit change, nor a technology slot justify. Anyways, opinion me, moving on. Small win here, Atheism, another of the unique technologies in that poll I posted a little while back, they're acknowledging there's a problem with it. No more 500 gold cost. Still has current effect, which I don't love, but I think it's a lot less egregious now than it was. Yeah, there's like a lot of really cool and fitting balance changes. I'm just, again, trying to focus on stuff that I think has implications for theory crafting. Like this one, actually. The Malian change, where villagers drop off 15% more gold. This new term, drop off 50% more, that's very interesting. And I think we could have a lot of fun with that with all sorts of different builds. I'm going to remember this one. I know that a lot of people really don't like the organ gun changes, like for balance purposes, but I actually quite like them from a historicity standpoint. It makes a lot more sense for how organ guns actually functioned. I think that the only change I would have made would give them a broader cone of fire and more projectiles. Or maybe having the projectiles do more damage. Something like that. I'm sure they'll find the right balance eventually. Or maybe they won't. Who knows? The Donjon change. This one was interesting. I love the training spearmen out of Donjons thing. That sounds like something I would come up with, to be perfectly honest. Just gives the Sicilians' particular identity a little more versatility, while also giving us precedent for things like a unique building also being able to train just one specific type of common unit, as well as like the functions as a prerequisite things. Those are both useful and interesting for us as theory crafters to consider. Spanish bonus. This one was cool. 20 gold for each tech research. That's very, very strong in my eyes. I think this is going to end up getting nerfed. But even if it doesn't, it does once again give us as theory crafters some new toys to work with. Gain X for technology researched. Certainly hasn't been done before in game and hasn't been done in any of my builds, so I think we can make some pretty decent use of this one as well. And last thing I wanted to talk about are the Viking changes. First of all, I saw on a forum some guy mentioned hating the Viking changes and saying that the new Chieftains effect seems like something you'd see in a theory crafting build. Called out, you are completely correct, and I'm shameless about it, my guy. I think this is cool. It's not amazing, but it's cool. I think it is really over-tuning the technology, even though I think this is predominantly going to be flavor. I just still hate the name Chieftains. But that's an aside. What this means from a theory crafting standpoint, before I sidetrack myself, is that these sort of offbeat infantry raiding bonuses, kind of focusing on flavor over streamlinedness, I think that is great. And to me, this is one of the most important signals that this update is sending to us, is that this is a direction the game wants to go in. Another one, the Berserker Gang removal. Yes, get out of here. Technologies that only affect one unit. Go away. And this did not affect it substantially enough. Once again, if anything could just be rolled into an elite upgrade, shouldn't exist as a technology. Like, even something like Parthian Tactics, I personally find to be very, very borderline. But again, opinion me. So Berserker Gang, suck. I'll be honest, I don't love the replacement. I think that it is, it's a cute reference to it's like an Age of Mythology mod, I think, right? But it doesn't really make sense to me that the Vikings are still being pushed as an archer civilization even after their archer lines were nerfed, but I can kind of see that, it was popular and the devs got a bunch of flack, and so they're trying to, not backpedal, but, reshuffle how that actually works. So, not perfectly sold, and I think that my main problem with this is that there are so many more flavorful ideas and bonuses that come out, because they have 3 whole nations, 3 and plus whole nations to choose from. Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, kind of Iceland if you want to go there. And they went with this. I'm not sold personally. But that's opinion. That's not to do with theory crafting. On the theory crafting front, what I think is important is that it means that, first of all, I think this is mostly just like a cheeky reference to Age of Mythology, and that's why they went with this particular name. And so references are in, and once again, technologies that only affect a single unit in a relatively inconsequential way are out. And we love it. Overall, I would say that this was one of the most impactful and relevant patches of all time from a theory crafting standpoint. It is pointing the game in many directions that are very friendly to me, at least, as a theory crafter, saying, we, the devs of Age of Empires, we want to push the boundaries as well. We want to get rid of some of the stinky cheese that has just kind of hung around in the game out of inertia more than anything else. And we want to actually make civilizations feel more unique and different, except for the Chinese, which sucks. But anyways, so overall, really pleased to see where they're going with this. I think it can just get better from here. And thank you guys very much for watching. I hope that despite being scrappy and unedited, this was still interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me all about it down below in the comments. What do you think about this patch? What do you think it means for the game going forward? And what do you think it means for theory crafting? What it means for me personally is I got to work on that big infantry video that I have planned. Because I think there are many, many ways that we can improve infantry that don't just give the militia line +1 pierce armor in Castle Age for 200 resources. But as always, my name is Robbie Howell, and ciao for now.